Have you ever tried to help someone you deeply care about, only to end up feeling exhausted, guilty, or strangely disconnected from your own peace, as if the harder you try to lift them, the heavier your spirit becomes? Because this video, Expert Psychologist reveals top mistakes in helping others, is going to expose the spiritual and emotional traps hidden inside the act of helping, the ones mature adults fall into without realizing it, and the thumbnail, helping them hurts you, is not exaggeration, it's a warning. A warning that sometimes your compassion quietly turns into self-neglect, your support turns into burden, and your desire to be a good person becomes the very reason you feel drained, stuck, or spiritually disturbed. And if any part of you has ever wondered why helping certain people feels more like losing yourself than loving them, then this message is exactly the clarity you've been praying for. Mistake 1. Carrying their burden instead of supporting them. One of the biggest mistakes people make, especially those with soft hearts and strong faith, is confusing helping someone with carrying their entire life on your shoulders. And the truth is, many times you don't even notice it happening, until you're emotionally drained, spiritually heavy, and mentally scattered, all because you picked up a burden God never asked you to lift. Mature adults do this silently. You take responsibility for their choices, their healing, their emotions, even their future, hoping that if you just give a little more, love a little harder, or stay a little longer, things will finally change. But here's the painful truth. When you carry someone else's burden in a way that replaces their responsibility with your effort, you don't help them grow, you disable them. You block their accountability. And without realizing it, you shift from being supportive to being consumed. Because supporting someone means walking with them, but carrying them means walking instead of them. And that is the fastest way to lose your strength, your peace, and your God-given balance. Mistake 2. Trying to fix people God is still working on. But pause for a moment and ask yourself this. What if the heaviness you feel isn't coming from your own life, but from someone you keep trying to rescue? Because the second mistake people make, especially those who genuinely want to be a blessing, is trying to fix people God is still working on. You step in with advice, support, comfort, money, encouragement, and somehow nothing changes. Not because you're doing it wrong, but because they're not ready. Some hearts open slowly, some minds resist truth, and some people only learn when life teaches them, not when you do. Mature adults often ignore this sign. They keep pouring into someone who isn't listening, isn't healing, and honestly, isn't trying. And the painful reality is this. When you try to fix someone God hasn't prepared yet, you don't speed up their growth, you interrupt it. You end up fighting battles that aren't yours, carrying emotions that aren't yours, and suffering consequences that were never meant for you. Because not every person can be helped at the time you want to help them. Some people aren't unhealed, they're unwilling. And that difference is everything. Mistake 3. Confusing compassion with sacrifice. But let me ask you something even deeper. Have you ever noticed that no matter how much you give, support, comfort, or sacrifice, the relationship still feels stuck, unbalanced, or strangely draining? Because the third mistake people make, often with the purest intentions, is confusing compassion with sacrifice. You think being kind means losing sleep, losing peace, losing energy, even losing yourself. You think loving someone means accepting emotional chaos, tolerating disrespect, or constantly putting your needs last. Mature adults do this quietly and painfully. But true compassion doesn't ask you to shrink, suffer, or break in the process of helping someone else. When your help starts costing you your mental health, your stability, or your spiritual center, that is no longer compassion, it's self-abandonment. And the enemy loves when good-hearted people drain themselves in the name of helping, because he knows a tired, empty, emotionally bruised person can't pour into anyone, not even themselves. Real love supports, but it never destroys. And if helping them is pulling you away from your peace, your clarity, or your God-given identity, that's not love anymore. That's sacrifice God never asked you to make. Mistake 4. Taking God's role instead of partnering with Him. But think about this for a moment. What if the real reason you're exhausted isn't because you're helping, but because you're trying to do God's job for Him? Because the fourth mistake so many people make, especially the strong, dependable, caring ones, is stepping into a role God never assigned to them. You start controlling outcomes, forcing solutions, managing their emotions, over-explaining truth, or trying to save someone who doesn't even want to change. Without realizing it, you begin carrying their spiritual process, their healing timeline, even their personal responsibility. And when you do that, the weight becomes unbearable. Not because you're weak, but because that burden was never yours. Mature adults fall into this trap because they've lived enough life to want to protect others from pain. But sometimes pain is the very thing God uses to wake someone up. When you step between them and the lesson God is trying to teach, you don't help them, you interfere. You drain yourself trying to produce results only God can create. And the moment helping them starts feeling like controlling, fixing, rescuing, or managing, that's the moment you've stepped out of love and into pressure. And God never asked you to carry pressure, only faith. At the end of the day, helping others is one of the holiest things you can do, but only when it's done with wisdom, boundaries, and God's guidance. Because when helping starts hurting you, your peace, your clarity, your emotional balance, that's a sign you're no longer helping from strength, you're helping from emptiness. And emptiness cannot heal anyone. The truth is, real love does not require you to lose yourself, weaken your spirit, or sacrifice your sanity. Real love partners with God, not replaces Him. It supports without rescuing, cares without collapsing, and gives without draining the very life out of you. So if you've been feeling heavy, tired, frustrated, or spiritually stretched thin, maybe it's not because you're failing but because you've been carrying people God only asked you to pray for. And the moment you step back, breathe, and let God take His rightful place, your peace returns, your strength renews, and your heart remembers something powerful. You can care deeply without carrying everything. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is let God handle what your hands were never meant to hold.